Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Learn-Biology AP Bio Review. It is so great to be with you on this Wednesday night, April 17th. I'm so happy to be doing the thing that I love best, which is teaching and reviewing biology. It's kind of an important day because today is the 17th and yesterday was the 16th, and I never know exactly how to count these things, but it kind of means that it's less than a month to go before the AP Bio exam. So it's getting to be crunch time. It's time to really start knuckling down. And one thing that I've been saying to folks is that the amount of learning that you can do with learn-biology.com, which is the website that I'm the creator of, is really phenomenal. And I just want to encourage you to consider the possibility that practicing for a half an hour a day with the interactive features on learn-biology.com can have a transformative effect on you and change the feelings that you're having from like, oh my God, the AP Bio test is coming up, to I got this. You can do that. You just need to structure the right kind of interaction. And that's what we've created for you on learn-biology.com. So I'm very excited tonight to be talking about sort of the alpha and omega of biology. We're talking about extinction, and we're talking about the origin of life. I guess that makes it more the omega and alpha of biology. And one thing that I want to encourage people to do is that if you're in the audience, why don't you just use the comment feature in YouTube and just let me know where you're from. I'm broadcasting from the learn-biology.com world headquarters in Berkeley, California. Fantastic place to be. Just went for a great bike ride. We're getting some really nice April weather these days, and I'm curious about where you're from if you're watching. I also want to emphasize that I've got an agenda. I want to talk about extinction and the origin of life, but the most important thing for me is to answer your questions. The beauty of YouTube Live is that it's an interactive format, so ask me questions. And in addition, based on viewer demand, I'm going to start doing a regular set of multiple choice questions. I might even try some FRQs tonight and see how that works. Sort of brings me back to my Zoom days when I taught on Zoom during the deep COVID year when we were all in lockdown. But that's now getting to be a more distant memory. And here we are learning biology in 2024, getting ready for this year's AP Bio exam. So let's proceed with the show. And again, haven't seen anybody chat in yet, but I'm anxious to do that. Wanted to introduce myself. I'm Glenn Wokenfeld, also known as Mr. W, if you couldn't get your mouth around Wokenfeld. And I am a recently retired AP biology teacher, and now I'm doing this kind of online education full-time through YouTube and the learn-biology.com website that I'm the creator of. When I taught AP biology, huge numbers of my students got 4s and 5s on the AP Bio exam, and I think that through these YouTube review sessions, and especially through my website, learn-biology.com, I can do the same for you. When I taught, one reason for my success was my use of learn-biology.com. I want to point out that we're not going to talk about phylogeny today, but we do have a phylogeny tutorial. And learn-biology.com is an interactive website where you can learn so much so quickly. And I want to encourage you to sign up for an account, and you can do that at learn-biology.com AP Biology. With your subscription to learn-biology.com, you get access to the Biomania AP Bio App. And I would hold up my phone and show it to you, but I'm using my phone to actually broadcast this live show. So I can't hold up my phone, but basically AP Biology in the palm of your hand. You've got access to multiple choice quizzes, FRQs, flashcards, click-on challenges, unit reviews on the Biomania app. It's a subset of the content that's on learn-biology.com. I'll tell you more about that later. A really good move now that you're really getting serious about studying would be for you to download our AP Bio study checklist. You can do that at apbiosuccess.com/checklist. I should have prepared a copy of that to show you, but basically it lists all the topics in AP Biology. It's very comprehensive. And what you can do is you can go through it and use what's called the stoplight method to identify the things you know well, kind of know, and don't know at all. And then the way to study is to emphasize the things that you don't know at all. Fill the gaps in your knowledge. That's what learn-biology.com is great for. And that's what using this checklist will help you with. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about extinction, and then we're going to talk about the origin of life. And that is going to leave us a lot of time. The reason why we're talking about extinction is because last night, by popular demand from the people who are watching, we decided to do some MC tests. And I decided to go along with that because it's a great idea. And, you know, the whole point of YouTube is it's an interactive format. So if you want to see some MC tests, why don't you put that in the chat right now, like MC tests, Mr. W, something like that, a message to me so that I know that, you know, that's what people want, because ultimately I want to do what you want to do. I'm a little tiny bit concerned about a slide missing, so I'm going to do a little check here, and just excuse me while I do that. Here we are, here we are. Something happened. Not really sure. Usually I like to start by telling you about some of the questions that we'll be addressing, but I'm not going to do that right now. We're just going to get right into the content, and to help with that process, I'm going to move myself so that I'm not in front of this diagram the way that I am here. And let's see what that does. Not so good. How about that? Very small. That's pretty good, but I can be all the way over here. No. That's the one. That's one. Okay, so let's go. What happens to species as it heads towards extinction? In previous episodes of this review, we've been going through evolution, since it's the topic that most people are in around the country right now. And of course, they're finishing up ecology too. We've talked about all of these processes that produce biodiversity. So for example, speciation produces diversity over time as species branch into descendant species. They go through processes like adaptive radiation. But on average, species only live for a couple of million years, if that long. So what is the process by which a species winks out, a species leaves our Earth? So this is a positive feedback loop that's called the extinction vortex. And here's how it works. It begins with a lowering of a species population. And so you can start over here, a small population. What might that be caused by? An adverse change in the physical environment, so that the species, which was formerly well adapted, is suddenly less adapted. The arrival of a competitor that reduces the species' fitness and reproductive rate. But in any case, the species is not reproducing so well. So its population becomes small and it becomes isolated. The smallness and the isolation leads to genetic drift. And genetic drift, as you know, is a random movement over of a population over a genetic space in a way that winds up usually reducing the amount of alleles that are present in a population. So we have a loss of genetic diversity. Well, diversity, and in fact, this is an important idea from the AP Bio curriculum. Diversity, variability, that's good. Diversity means that you have more variability with which to weather environmental change, and there might be someone in your population that can pass their genes on. Variability is good. As you lose variability, that reduces fitness. It reduces adaptability. You wind up with a very fixed gene pool without a lot of biodiversity. Well, you have less fitness, less adaptability, and then you have less reproduction and higher mortality. There's less ability to bear offspring, and the lifespan goes down. And so that reduces the population. So you can see this is a positive feedback loop. Sometimes something like this is called a vicious circle. positive feedback loop, same kind of thing. But we have a loss of genetic diversity, less variability, leading to reduced fitness. And then genetic uniformity reduces the ability to adapt to environmental change. And the result, a positive feedback loop called an extinction vortex, leading to extinction. And again, one thing I want to emphasize is that if, as I'm teaching any of this, you have any questions and you want to ask me, what about this? What about this? Feel free. That's what YouTube Live is all about. And nothing makes me happier than seeing questions or comments in that comment stream. So knowing that, comment. Okay, be great to hear from you. So what we just talked about, that's a kind of run-of-the-mill extinction, and that's related to adaptation and variability and features like that. Milk bread, thank you so much. But every once in a while, the Earth is beset by what's called a mass extinction event. Let's go through how these work. Mass extinction is not like what we just saw. That's one species slowly winking out because it's becoming less well adapted. In this case, there's a widespread, rapid decrease in Earth's biodiversity. You're not losing one species, you're losing hundreds, thousands, millions of species all at once. Often these have nothing to do with who's well adapted and who's not. They often have geological or astronomical causes, though biological causes are possible as well. So, for example, this mass extinction over here, that was the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. And that was caused by an asteroid meteor impact that hit somewhere around the Gulf of Mexico, set up a plume of dust. And this is kind of an amazing idea. There's a great show on Radiolab. It's called Dino-Apocalypse, something like that. And what happened was that all those meteorites went into space. As they came down, they superheated the atmosphere. So for a couple of hours, Earth's surface all over the planet was as hot as an oven, as hot as an oven. The dinosaurs didn't make it through that. The only animals that did make that, the only plants that did make that, were animals that were underground. So the dinosaurian ancestors of birds did make it through. Many fish made it through. There was widespread collapse of ecosystems, so even some marine reptiles like the ichthyosaurs and stuff like that, they did not make it through. There have been at least 5 major extinction events during the past 600 billion years, and these are all the peaks in the diagram. So this is the Cretaceous extinction. This is, I believe, called the Great Die-Off, though it might be this one over here. That was caused by geological phenomena like all of the Earth's plates coming together, huge volcanic eruptions, changes in the atmosphere. If you were on the planet, it was very hard to survive during that period. But an important thing to know is that the Earth has a lot of biodiversity. So even if you wipe out 90% of the existing species, the ones that survive wake up to a new day. And on that new day, many of the other animals that were on the planet were gone. Many of the other plants that were on the planet were gone. And so what you have is this pattern. And this is a kind of thing that I would, look, everything I teach you about, I think you should know about, but this seems to be particularly important for the AP Bio exam. Mass extinction leaves vacant a variety of ecological niches, ways for a species to make a living. And the result is mass extinctions, that's what's happening at this red line over here, number 2, are followed by extensive adaptive radiations. And adaptive radiation is when one species repeatedly branches into a number of descendants. If you think about the Galapagos finches, that's adaptive radiation. So there we go, one species undergoing multiple adaptive radiations, producing all these descendants. And an example is you and me. The thing that's cool about biology is that you should take this stuff personally. Like, I know you're getting ready for the big test, and I know that you're thinking about your grades and stuff like that. But what is really important is what is really important is to take this stuff personally. You are here because of this extinction that happened during Cretaceous times that wiped out the dinosaurs. I am really pleased to see a couple of questions and comments that are coming up. And I see a question from Sophie. Would you be able to explain a little bit further the geological causes of extinction? I only know about this stuff in a general way. And the extinction event that I know about most is the Permian-Triassic extinction. And if you'll indulge me, what I'd like to do is go over to this. I'm going to first of all grab this so I can go back to it. I'm using a kind of software that's called StreamYard. And if I jump to another tab, you won't be able to see what I'm looking at. I actually spoke for about 5 minutes in a previous show where I didn't realize that was happening. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you over to learn-biology.com. And I just want to show you some cool pictures. Learn-biology.com, we're going to go to courses, AP Bio version 2.0, and we're going to look at evolution, and we're going to look at extinction. Fantastic. So here's the same diagram that we just looked at. And here's what I wrote about the Cretaceous Tertiary extinction. That's the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. Here's the Permian extinction. It's called the Great Dying, and it's going to be boring if I read all this, so it's just I'm just going to paraphrase. The greatest of all mass extinctions. There were massive releases of carbon dioxide, and that's because in what's currently Siberia, Eastern Russia now, there were a series of enormous volcanic eruptions that released significant quantities of carbon dioxide into the air. Check this out. These might have ignited sediments rich in coal and petroleum that released additional carbon dioxide, and that acted as a greenhouse gas. And as that's happening, there's also poisoning of the oceans. There's increased ocean temperatures that reduce the amount of dissolved oxygen in the oceans, and that led to flourishing of bacteria that released hydrogen sulfide gas into the atmosphere. So pretty mind-blowing. So that's the kind of geological thing that we're talking about, Sophie, and I hope that was useful. Another thing is that the continents have drifted over time, and the continental shelves are among the richest biological zones on the planet. There have been moments when all of the continents formed together into a supercontinent, and just by doing that, there was a huge loss of a continental shelf, and that in and of itself caused a massive die-off of marine species. And also it created this situation where, it's kind of nicer. I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying that, but you know how the weather is kind of better on the coasts? It's much more moderate, whereas if you live in the interior of the country, there's much more extremes. Well, imagine what it would be like if you were 6,000 miles away from the nearest ocean. That's what much of the terrestrial surface of the planet was like when there was Pangea. So I'm getting a little bit off the rails here, but that's because I love this stuff so much. And Sophie, maybe give me a thumbs up or something like that if that answered your question. And I'm going to go back to the place where we were before. Okay. Sophie, thank you. Thank you for saying thank you. I really appreciate that. Okay, so we're back at it. We've talked about how, again, you should take this personally. You're only here because of mass extinctions that, for example, wiped out the dinosaurs. Had they not been wiped out, our kind, some mouse-like ancestor that, was living 65 million years ago, underwent some adaptive radiation that gave rise to us, the primates, and then ultimately to us. So biology, it can't be much cooler than biology. I actually want to take this moment to thank Milkbread and Sayan, who called me the goat. And I didn't know what that term was. Somebody left me a comment, said, "You're the goat." And I was like, I have to look it up on like a dictionary. But, I figured it out, and I love being called the goat. Thank you. Okay, how is human activity affecting extinction rates? Humans are the cause of what's been called the sixth extinction. So here's the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. We're creating the sixth one. It doesn't really show on this graph. But what we're doing is we're causing a decline in global biodiversity that could rival the 5 previous mass extinctions that have occurred over the past 500 million years. And here are some of the human activities: destruction and fragmentation of habitat. And by the way, when I do Unit 8, which will start in just a couple of days, we'll talk about that more in detail. Overhunting and overharvesting of animals. So, like, for example, overfishing and things like that is causing multiple extinctions. And overall, intentionally or unintentionally introducing invasive species into new habitats. And is there anything more? No, those are the kinds of things that we're doing that are causing the 6 extinctions. So I don't know if there'll be an AP Bio question about that, but that's sort of like an important life question. Like, we should all know this, right? That humans are having this impact upon the biological world. And once we lose species, it's very hard to get them back. So let's do some practice. I think we should wait a little bit. I think I should teach a little bit more because I only have a couple of slides that are going to focus on the next topic, which is going to be the origin of life. And then once we do that, we can go on to Learn-Biology and we can do some practice. So I'm going to hold off on doing this practice, but just want to let you know that if you wanted to practice, you could go to this page. And I'm going to hold off on the impulse to show it to you now. And instead, I'm going to go like this. Let's talk about the origin of life. And let's talk about some of the questions that we're going to address in this next section. What are the key steps in explaining the origin of life? What was the Miller-Urey experiment? And what is the RNA world? It's very hard to know how much of the origin of life will show up on the AP exam. I mean, you got 60 multiple choice questions that cover this huge swath of material, and then you've got a bunch of FRQs. But my strategy with my students was always teach the content, know the content well, and then you are kind of set to use your mental resources to do the kind of analysis that you need to do when you're answering all those tricky questions that the College Board is going to be throwing at you on May 16th. So let's go. How did life naturally emerge in the absence of life? So this is really the key question for understanding the origin of life. And here's sort of the tricky thing. If you think about like the cell theory, all cells come from other cells. So how do you get the first cell without another cell to produce it? And that question reverberates throughout this entire topic. So like, for example, DNA. DNA is made by protein, but you need DNA to code for protein. So how can you make protein in the absence of DNA? You know, there are all these kinds of chicken and the egg things that show up. One thing that's kind of cool to consider is that the early Earth was a terrible place. Like if we were transported back 3.6, 3.7 billion years ago, we'd be in a hostile planet that would instantly kill us. There was no oxygen in the atmosphere, though in some ways that was conducive to the origin of life. There was massive volcanic activity. The seas pretty much covered everything. There were just little bits of land here and there. The moon was incredibly close. The moon might have been 30,000 miles away. What an eclipse that would have been. That would have been an eclipse that would have lasted a really long time because the moon could have totally eclipsed the sun because it was so much closer than it is now. And the relative sizes of the moon and the sun would have been much different, with the moon being much bigger than the sun. Now they happen to be about the same size, which is why eclipses are possible. And I just want to say that I saw the eclipse last week and it was the greatest. I hope some of you had the opportunity to do that. You're all very young, so you'll be around for the next eclipse, which is like in 2040 something. But the early Earth is an extremely hostile place. Life almost certainly didn't arise on the surface of the planet. Darwin had this idea of a warm little pool. Really what the thinking is now is that life emerged at some deep sea hydrothermal vents, and a special kind of vent called an alkaline hydrothermal vent, not those black smoker vents that are spewing smoke into the undersea environment. They're really cool. You can learn about that, and I have a good tutorial about that. But it's really a little bit outside the scope of AP Bio. And as much as I love biology and I want to go off the rails and just talk about stuff, I'm going to try and stay focused. So what are the key steps in explaining the origin of life? Well, first of all, the Earth had to be like cool enough for molecules to survive for any period of time. So there's a moment in which the Earth becomes habitable. Now that is followed by a period in which somehow there has to be abiotic synthesis of monomers. And what does that mean, abiotic? That means without life. Monomers today, carbohydrates, for example, like monosaccharides are the monomers of carbohydrates. Where do those come from? They come from photosynthesis. So living processes create those monomers. So the thing that you have to think about in terms of the origin of life is like, how could we have monomers in the absence of living processes to create those monomers? So that's one problem that we need to address. Another problem that we need to address is those monomers can't really do anything on their own. The interesting molecules are the polymerases, the proteins, which are polymers, the RNAs, which are polymers. Those are the cool things in biology. Well, enzymes stitch monomers together into polymers. And here's a little bit of review. What's that called? What's that kind of reaction when monomers make polymers? Can you get that into the chat right now? Monomers into polymers. How does that happen? I'll give you 3, 2, 1. Set it in the chat. I'm not seeing anything. And the answer is dehydration synthesis. But dehydration synthesis reactions are catalyzed by enzymes. Sophie, nice job. Nice job. Did you get that before I said it? I'll bet you did, because there's always a little bit of a time lag with YouTube. So how can you have dehydration synthesis in the absence of enzymes? So we've got to get our abiotic synthesis of monomers, then we've got to get our abiotic synthesis of polymers and vesicles, because what we're going to form at a certain point are what are called protocells. They might not be the full whole shebang of cells that can self-replicate, but there's a lipid membrane that's enclosing some biological molecules. That evolves into the first cell. That's a big leap that I just made right there. And then finally, we have the emergence of LUCA. LUCA stands for the last universal common ancestor. And that is the population of early cells that gave rise to the archaea, the bacteria, the 2 great prokaryotic clades. And then those 2 clades merged through endosymbiosis about 1.8 billion years ago to form the eukaryotes. This is kind of worth memorizing because you might have to, for example, sequence these questions in a multiple choice question. So understanding the sequence is this. And seeing a question just to orient people. Zoe, we are at the end of Unit 7, topic 7.13, I believe, is origin of life, and that's what we're reviewing right now. So Zoe, thanks for that question. So this leads to the Miller-Urey experiment. The Miller-Urey experiment has actually shown up on previous AP Bio tests with a diagram that's similar to this one, but I haven't seen it for a couple of years. And my analysis of the College Board's course and exam description, they don't really list Miller-Urey, but I kind of can't believe that because it's so important. The Miller-Urey experiment was performed in 1953, unbelievably the same year in which Watson and Crick discovered the structure of DNA. Watson and Crick with Franklin's help. You know, we all know how that worked. And it was front page news. This was on the cover of Life magazine, which was like the #1 magazine back then. So the Miller-Urey experiment was totally cool. What Miller, who was the graduate student of a Caltech professor, I could be getting that wrong, named Harold Urey, did was he created this apparatus, which was like vacuum sealed, completely sterile. This represented the ancient oceans. This is a heat source, a Bunsen burner. And this came into a chamber where he was able to place gases that represented what was thought to be the early atmosphere at that time. They got the early atmosphere wrong, but the early atmosphere consisted of gases like ammonia, carbon dioxide, methane, no oxygen because there was no free oxygen, and water vapor. And basically, this indicates sparks. And basically, they circulated water and ran electricity, sparks through it. And then there was a condenser that cooled things down. And then molecules would accumulate in this trap over here that can be sampled periodically. And what they discovered was that after running this for a certain period of time, they were able to find amino acids in this area over here, the same amino acids that make up proteins today. So what did that prove? It established that abiotic synthesis of amino acids was possible. This has become the model for many subsequent experiments, though I want to emphasize that origin of life research is still a long way from producing anything like what would be the proof of concept, which is like, oh, we got a living cell to emerge from our apparatus. That on Earth might have taken hundreds of millions of years to emerge. And that experiment was, of course, happening all over the planet. So that hasn't happened, but this is kind of a proof of concept that at least abiotic synthesis of monomers is possible. And people have created other apparatuses to then look about, well, how could those monomers form into polymers? So Stanley Miller, knowing this general idea, that's important. And that leads us to the RNA world. The RNA world is a super important concept to know about. And the basic idea is this. Early life's genetic material was much more likely RNA than DNA. The reason why is the following. RNA is a very interesting molecule because, like proteins, it can fold up into interesting three-dimensional shapes. Now, that's not a particularly interesting shape, but ribosomes can have essentially an infinite number of shapes, whereas DNA, only one shape. DNA is a double helix. It's nothing but a double helix. And the basic idea is that RNA can store genetic information. It is actually the genetic molecule that's found in certain viruses, but RNA can also act upon the world. RNA can be catalytic. RNA can change things. DNA is just a library. RNA is a library and its action. So here's the scenario. You'd have inorganic precursor molecules that would be like the kinds of things that emerged from the Stanley Miller experiment that we just talked about, or actually the things that were in the gas, so carbon dioxide and other molecules like that. Through abiotic processes, that would form RNA monomers. It's got to be abiotic. There's no life. Those RNA monomers would then form into RNA polymers. Linked monomers are polymers. And those would eventually start to curl up into complex shapes. Why? Because RNA bases are capable of forming internal hydrogen bonds. Think about the structure of a tRNA, for example. It's got that cloverleaf shape. Well, imagine RNAs folding up into those shapes, and some of those shapes are catalytic. That enables the system to start self-replicating. And once we have self-replication, then we have protocells that can essentially evolve into cells. We have a system where natural selection can start acting upon those protocells to see, oh, which will survive the longest, which will provide which will be the most stable, which can mutate a little bit so that we can have some diversity. And ultimately, we have the last universal common ancestor. And here's a little bit of a challenge. If you can identify what the numbers are on this last universal common ancestor, then you know a lot of cell biology and you're in really good shape. And I'm going to try something. I just want to see if this will work. In this diagram, what number has to represent RNA? What number has to represent RNA? And you've got, 1 through 7 are your choices. So you just have to put in one number. What represents RNA in this diagram? Let's see it. I want to see some stuff coming through. Okay. I should have some background music for moments like this, or maybe I could sing the glycolysis song or something like that. That would be kind of fun. And number 3 is correct. Way to go, Julia. Way to go, Dante. Way to go, Sophie. Fantastic. Okay, here's a tough one. Milk bread. Way to go. A port for facilitated diffusion. A port for facilitated diffusion. What number are we talking about? Let's see it. Waiting for those numbers to come in. Maybe I'll just sing in the background while I'm waiting. Glycolysis. Come on, sugar for the breakdown. For the breakdown. A port for facilitated diffusion. What could that be? Folks, I'm not seeing anything. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, here's how to think about this. You're thinking of a protein. Somebody got it. Noodles. Fantastic. Yeah. You're thinking of a protein that's embedded in the membrane over here. How do things enter cells when they enter through facilitated diffusion? They have to enter through a protein channel. So not, okay. Julie, I really appreciate your answer. That's pretty good. Julie, this is probably too small to really see, and that's probably why you got it, why you got this one wrong. But 5 was the answer to that previous question. 7, you can see this. This is very, very tough, but you can see that hydrogen ions are being pumped through. You probably can't see this. This is too small. I'm going to actually stop the slideshow and make this a little bigger. Can I do that? Maybe that's a little helpful right now. I'll fix this up later. Okay, so now I'm going to show the slideshow again. So now if you take a good look at this, you can see a hydrogen ion is flowing through, and ADP and phosphate is being made into ATP. So for, I don't know, I was going to offer a prize. I don't really have any prizes that I can offer, but what's the name of number 7? What's the name of number 7? Can somebody put this in? Anybody? Okay. I'm trying to figure out like what's a reasonable amount of delay on this time. Okay. So what we got going on at number 7, and this is important to know. This is super important to know. 7 is we've got diffusion of protons that's resulting in the synthesis of ATP. Where does that happen? That happens in 2 processes. And guys, you got to know this. This happens in both photosynthesis and it happens in cellular respiration. And I am going to take a trip over to learn-biology.com to show you this. And we're going to go there, and we're going to go to courses. We're going to go AP Bio version 2.0. We're going to go to cellular energetics, and we're going to go to cellular respiration, the electron transport chain, and chemiosmosis. And check this out. Okay, right here, what do we have happening? Oh, you don't have it there. Sorry. Here, we have a situation where protons are diffusing through a channel and they're converting ADP and phosphate into ATP. What do we got going on? This is ATP synthase. This is the channel that is also an enzyme that uses the kinetic energy of diffusing protons to generate ATP. And I'm going to indulge myself by jumping over here, go back to unit 3. We're going to go to photosynthesis, which is right down here. We're going to go to light reactions, and I've got a really cool diagram that I want to show you. Do I have a cool diagram? Yes, here it is. Can I make this big? Fantastic. This is exactly the same thing. Photosynthesis is about pumping protons from the stroma into the thylakoid space. Then those protons diffuse out through the ATP synthase channel, and that's how they create ATP. Now, here's the deal. Often you don't get like big context when you're doing AP biology, but this formation of ATP through ATP synthase that's using diffusion of protons, this is like a universal feature of life. And that's why it's widely thought that LUCA, the last universal common ancestor of all living things, in the same way as LUCA had to have DNA, in the same way as LUCA had to have, oh, that wasn't the right page. In the same way, let me go back to that page. Here we are, bam, okay, slideshow. In the same way as LUCA had to have DNA and RNA and use ribosomes for protein synthesis, LUCA also had to have ATP synthase. So I see Noodles, Lily May got that right. Fantastic. So folks, you got to study up, and the way to study up, learn-biology.com. And in fact, we've done this already. Let's do some practice. All right. And what we're going to do is this is going to be totally interactive. And why don't we do this? Why don't we do a vote? If you want to do FRQs, put FRQ in the chat. If you want to do multiple choice, put multiple choice in the chat. And, I'm going to go over to this page in the meanwhile. And here we are. Okay, so paste this in. You know what? Before I do that, I'm going to grab this page. Thank you. Thanks for your patience with this. I really appreciate it. Okay, so now we're going to go here. And bam. Go like that. Go like that. There we are. Wait, what happened? Okay, well, that wasn't the worst thing that ever happened. So I want to go here. I'm going to AP Bio Review. And what I am on now is the AP Bio Review page on learn-biology.com. And this is the place where you're going to want to spend a lot of time during the next less than 4 weeks, right? Because this is where you'll be able to do some reviews. So let's say that we wanted to review multiple choice. We're split vote. I got Lily voted for MCQ and Sophie voted for FRQ. I think that let's see if we can do a little bit of both. We'll start with MCQ because it works a little bit better in this format. So here I'm going to multiple choice reviews. And I just want to show you what you can do. So perfect. So you go to the AP Bio Review page, you choose multiple choice, you click Start Quiz. And then this is so cool. You get to choose what you want to study. You can study for the whole course, but right now, let's not do that. So I'm going to unselect that. I'm going to expand evolution. And let's just talk about the last 2 units, speciation, variation, extinction, and the origin of life. So I'm going to show questions, and you guys are going to put in answers, and that's how we'll do some good review. I hope everybody is ready. I'm going to take a little sip of tea from my Science Music Videos mug. And let's begin our practice, okay? So what we're going to do is notice that there are 20 questions that fit this criteria. So let's begin practice. Okay. In all of these questions, the first choice is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, do it like that. So Earth's early atmosphere. Earth's atmosphere today is significantly different than the atmosphere on the early Earth 4 billion years ago. Which of the following gases is present in today's atmosphere but was not present in early Earth's atmosphere? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which gas was not present in the early Earth? Waiting for a response. Putting in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And remember, you got to make these choices fast. I don't know if you really have to make them fast. Okay. So I see one response so far. I see another response. Great. You all nailed it. And let's go with everybody. And then we'll click O2. Excellent. The molecular oxygen in today's atmosphere is the product of billions of years of photosynthesis. First by prokaryotic photosynthesizers like cyanic bacteria, which were later joined by algae and plants. Okay, now that is a connection that I hope you made. Like early Earth had no oxygen. Oxygen was produced by photosynthesis. Hey, what reaction of photosynthesis produces oxygen? What reaction? You know, there are sort of two main reactions in photosynthesis. Can anybody tell me what reaction of photosynthesis produces oxygen? Want to see it? Want to see a comment? I'm waiting. Anything coming in? It's not oxidative phosphorylation. It's the light reactions of photosynthesis, or the light-dependent reactions. So, got to hone this. There's so much time to go. If you're getting some of these questions wrong, that's fine, because what is the best study process? It's about figuring out what you don't know and then filling the gaps. And that's how you're going to get yourself set up for a 4 or a 5 on the AP Bio exam. Okay, so this is a speciation question. I hope everybody's down for this. Researchers on Corsica, a large island in the Mediterranean Sea, have proposed that small lizards on that island might be undergoing speciation. Which of the following conditions would be most favorable to speciation? Well, here's one. Multiple populations of lizards on different parts of the island prey on the same type of insect. 2, the lizards have a breeding cycle in which breeding occurs more during the raining season than during the dry summer months. 3, a lava flow between the northern and southern parts of the island has created a zone that lizards are unable to cross. And 4, the lizards can produce both sexually and asexually. And I'm seeing that people already put in 3. You guys are the coolest, and that is so great. And that's because 3 would lead to reproductive isolation. The lava flow would set the stage for allopatric speciation, which requires some kind of geographical barrier. You guys are killing it. Let's go. Another evolution question. And this kind of question is really good because this is a very AP-like question. It's based on a data set. And let's see what's going on. The soapberry bug, Latin name, lives in the southeastern United States, uses a needle-like beak to pierce the outside skin of the fruit of the soapberry bush. After piercing the skin, the soapberry bug pierces the seed coat. Enzymes liquefy the seeds, and the bugs suck up the liquefied seed contents. Over the past 150 years, the soapberry bug has adapted to an introduced plant species from Eurasia, K. elegans. It has a fruit structure in which the seeds are much closer to the skin of the fruit than in the original fruit. A study in the 1990s, measurements were made of the beak length of soapberry bugs feeding on C. corundum compared to those feeding on the introduced species. So that's the setup. Here's the bug. Here you can see its long beak. And here you can see that this is a tough graph to read because basically this both below and above indicates beak length, but this is indicating it for the original species, C. corundum, and this is for the introduced species, K. elegans. All right, so notice this. A researcher has noticed that the bugs feeding on C. corundum are more likely to breed with one another than with bugs feeding on K. elegans. Which of the following is most likely the first barrier to gene flow to have emerged between soapberry bugs feeding on C. corundum and those feeding on K. elegans? Is that habitat isolation, mechanical isolation, temporal isolation, or behavioral isolation? What is going to separate those into two different groups? You can just put in 1, 2, 3, 4. We're all over the map here. Okay, so here I'm going to show you why this is so cool. I'm going to go with 2. Okay, and we get feedback. No, mechanical isolation involves changes that make it impossible for fertilization to occur. So, not to be too graphic about this, but like if the reproductive parts of these two subpopulations of bug became such that it was impossible for one to fertilize the other, that's mechanical isolation. Here we have a change in the size of the beak, but we're not really changing the, for not having a better word, because I don't know that much about insects, genitals. In animals, this can involve an incompatible fit with the structure of the genitals that prevents sperm from reaching the egg. While mechanical isolation might ultimately evolve between the two populations, there are other barriers that would evolve earlier. So here's how LearnDash Biology works. I gave you a hint about the wrong answer, and now that's going to go into the bottom of the queue. And if you were doing this quiz, you'd see this later. And we're not going to have time to go through all 18 questions. And in fact, I might stop this and just do some evolution questions because, geez, it's already 7:52. That went by so fast. Let's do another question. What happened? Okay, there we are. Oh, good. What about what we've been learning about? Mass extinctions, 1, are caused by collisions of asteroids or comets with the Earth. 2, occur about once every 100 million years and have a variety of causes. 3, have occurred only 3 times during the history of life on Earth. 4, are caused when invasive species arrive in new areas. I want to see a 1, 2, 3, or a 4. What's the best answer here? One, 2, 3, or 4. Oh, okay. Lily, I'm going to answer your question in a second, as soon as people put in their answers to this question. Okay, okay. Fantastic. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to jump back to respond to Lily's question. Okay. Now, I can't put this in, but the correct answer here is habitat isolation. Basically, what you have is populations of bugs that are adapting to different varieties. Actually, I'll just say different species of plants. And, think about bugs. If they're all concentrated on the same plant, they're much more likely to breed with one another who are eating on the same plant than those who are eating in a different plant. On top of that, one of these plants is in South Central United States. One of them is in Florida. So we kind of have a geographic thing that's going on too, but there's no barrier, right? It's all, you can get from one area to another, but this is all about habitat isolation. All right, habitat isolation. And again, when we go through the whole quiz, we'd see this question again. It might have made sense for me to have chosen a smaller number of questions to demonstrate that. So our answer for this was, many people said 2. Bam. That's correct. The frequency of mass extinctions is shown below. The causes are usually geological or astronomical. In other words, it's not always by some astronomical event, and it's definitely not about invasive species. And they've occurred more than 3 times. So, again, what's your best move when you're doing multiple choice? Process of elimination. So that's why 2 is the answer. Let's do another question. Okay. The diagram below is a model of some of the processes associated with mass extinction. This is going to be tough because of the size of the question. It It's widely agreed that birds are dinosaurs that survived the Cretaceous mass extinction that occurred 65 million years ago. With that in mind, which of the following interpretations of the model above is correct? So I don't know how I can do this and make this work. That's pretty good. You know, I was worried that you guys couldn't read this, but obviously you can. So that's good. So, and just remember that like up here, that's letter D. So letter B represents an extinct dinosaur lineage. Letter C represents a dinosaur lineage that survived the Cretaceous extinction. And letter D represents modern dinosaurs. All right, that's one possibility. 2, letter C represents the common ancestor of all dinosaurs, including birds. Letter B represents an extinct dinosaur clade. And letter D represents all dinosaurs. 3, letter B represents an extinct dinosaur clade. Letter C represents duck-billed dinosaurs. And letter D represents birds. And 4, letter A represents the common ancestors of only the extinct dinosaurs, whereas the letter C represents the common ancestor of all the living dinosaurs. Any ideas about this one? Tough question. Okay, I'm seeing some answers come in. Let's see a couple more. Anybody else brave enough to answer? Okay, I see an answer from Lily. I'm going to go with it. Let's see. Bam. Nice job. Letter B represents a dinosaur lineage that became extinct. You see it doesn't make it through the line. Letter C represents a dinosaur lineage that survived. Had to, it comes through. And that underwent an adaptive radiation, and that gave rise to the beautiful diversity of birds that we have on our planet today. So we're going to stop doing multiple choice for now. We're going to go back to our presentation. And okay, so now you know how you can practice, and you can practice by going to learn-biology.com/apbiology/apbio review menu. And that's how you get access to the kind of questions that we were looking at. And remember, we have a question picker where you can do one of two things. The thing to do now is to identify your gaps and then hone in on the weak areas. The thing to do later is to practice everything, because understanding biology at the AP Bio level involves a lot of cross-topic thinking. So that's what you have to do. So, you know, you'll be able to see this on the video. Take a screenshot of it now. If you want access to these quizzes, go to learn-biology.com/student sign up. The price is $24.95. I've been trying not to say the price because the price sometimes changes, but if you went there right now, it'd be $24.95, and you have access to all of the great quiz materials that we have. You also have access to essentially a whole interactive textbook. It's a fantastic value. I want you to go and make sure that you download our checklist, apbiosuccess.com/checklist. And you can use that to do a preliminary check of what you know and what you don't. And then you can use the links in the checklist to go to tutorials on learn-biology.com. Again, what are we trying to do? We're trying to fill the gaps. That's what a good AP Bio review process is. Just like reviewing your notes is a bad way to study, because you'll waste your time. You got to find the stuff you don't know and remediate that through filling the gaps. And the unit review pages, like this one over here, Unit 2 unit review page, that has flashcards, multiple choice quizzes, practice FRQs, click on challenges. So again, the resources are unbelievable. Keep on attending these live review. I should have put an S there. It's a little embarrassing to have to look at that. But keep on attending these live reviews. And do me a favor, please tell your friends. Here's the schedule for the live reviews. It's pretty easy. learn-biology.com/live-reviews. I'm doing one tomorrow night, so I hope you join me again. And I've scheduled so many more. I think this is the 4th one that we've done, and I'm doing a total of 23. So 19 to go. I'm going to be with you reviewing right to the end, but I want you to optimize the learning. And the way that you optimize the learning is by getting an account on learn-biology.com. So sign up at learn-biology.com/AP Biology. I am so grateful to you. This was really, really fun. There was a lot of participation. I had a great time, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow night. So thank you so much for being here with me. If you just want to sign off with a little thank you, see you tomorrow night, stuff like that, that would be awesome. And again, I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to keep on reviewing your job. Go to learn-biology.com/AP Biology. Sign up for an account on learn-biology.com, where we make AP Biology success really easy and really fun. Really fun. You know, it's so much more fun to interact. And Sophie, Lily, I'll see you tomorrow. And please, like, tell your friends, like, you know, you do all these social media things that I don't do. So let folks know that we're doing this, because the more people we have, the more fun it's going to be. Then we'll just have all these people who are going to be chatting in and stuff like that. It's going to be great. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. This was awesome. Everybody be well, stay safe. See you tomorrow. Bye.